Hello, and welcome to the Willie Morris Awards for Southern Writing. My name is Susan Nicholas, and I'm coming to you from the campus of the University of Mississippi. You may know that the University of Mississippi's Department of Writing and Rhetoric is the new home of the Willie Morris Awards for Southern Writing, a return to the home state of the award's namesake. Originally from Yazoo City, Mississippi, Mr. Morris served as writer-in-residence here from 1980 until 1991. As the youngest ever editor-in-chief at Harper's Magazine in New York, Morris inspired great writers and helped shape careers. As writer-in-residence, Morris mentored students and aspiring writers, stimulating both their creativity and their passion for the written word. This award continues that legacy. When it was announced that the Willie Morris Awards would make its new home at the university, we envisioned honoring our winners with a spring soiree in Oxford. Framed by blooming dogwood and redbud trees, our celebration of books, readers, and writers would be held on the historic square, perhaps at the Lyric Theater, with live music provided by local blues talent. There would be plenty of bourbon and, of course, shrimp and grits. We envisioned the conversations that would be shared, the connections made, and lots of laughter. But our reality this year is that the pandemic continues. Along with our partner organization, the Oxford Conference for the Book, we come to you in this virtual format. We're so pleased to join forces with the Oxford Conference for the Book. The conference is a 3-day gathering that takes place in Oxford and on the campus of the University of Mississippi. Since its inauguration in 1993, the conference has celebrated books, writing, and reading, but has also dealt with practical concerns on which the literary arts and the humanities depend, including literacy, freedom of expression, and the book trade itself. Beginning in 1999, the conference has been open to the public without charge. We are grateful to the amazing staff of the Oxford Conference for the Book and the Center for the Study of Southern Culture, who helped us organize this virtual event. We're also grateful to partner with Oxford's award-winning independent bookstore, Square Books, whose booksellers helped us get the nominated novels to our team of pre-readers and judges during a global pandemic. Our independent bookstores are treasures, and I hope you are supporting yours. The Willie Morris Awards are made possible by Dave Williams and Reba White Williams. Reba was inspired to create an award for writing when she learned that her nieces in high school had never read To Kill a Mockingbird. She decided that Southern literature, especially contemporary works, needed more attention. In 2008, Dave and Reba established the Willie Morris Award for Southern Fiction to promote under-recognized Southern writers while also preserving the life and legacy of Morris, Dave's classmate at the University of Texas and their longtime family friend. To ensure that the awards can be given in perpetuity, the Williamses established the Reba White Williams and Dave Williams Endowment. The endowment provides the resources necessary to administer these awards today and into the future. Thank you, Dave and Reba, for your unwavering support and generosity. The award comes with a cash prize of $10,000 for fiction and $2,500 for a single unpublished poem, a bowling trophy that harkens back to Willie Morris's years in Oxford, and in normal years, an expense-paid trip to Oxford, Mississippi. Our team of expert judges reviewed hundreds of nominated novels and poems looking for the winners we will announce tonight. The writing we will honor has been described as nuanced, textured, uncluttered, and stunning. These amazing novels made the Willie Morris Award for Southern Fiction shortlist. The Gone Dead by Chanel Benz. The Revisioners by Margaret Wilkerson Sexton. and In West Mills by Deshaun Charles Winslow. I encourage you to buy and read all three of these wonderful books. And the prize goes to In West Mills by Deshaun Charles Winslow. Earlier this week, Stephen Monroe spoke to our winner.
Hi, Deshaun.
Hey, Stephen, how you doing?
Great. Wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for this incredible novel, and congratulations on winning the Willie Morris Award.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm still in shock by it all. I really am. Thank you so much.
Well, we're looking forward to the day when we can host you in Oxford for a big party and a nice dinner and some drinks on the square.
I look forward to it. I've never been out that way, so I really look forward to it.
Okay, well, we can't wait for you to join us when conditions are safer.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I wanted to start, for everyone watching, I wanted to start just by encouraging everyone who's watching now or in the future to order Deshaun's wonderful novel from your local independent bookstore. This one came from Square Books. So order your copy today, please.
Thank you.
We're gonna have a conversation for a few minutes about the book, and I wanted to start by asking you, Deshaun, about Not Azalea, the central character of the book. I found myself really invested in her story, even though sometimes I didn't like her, or I got frustrated with her, kind of like Pep got frustrated with her.
Right.
And she seemed familiar to me in a lot of ways. I think we all have friends or family that are complicated, and we love them anyway. But I was thinking last night, what was it like to live with Not all those years while you were creating her, and then also now reflecting on her. How do you think about Not?
Well, Not came to me, well, the real Not was a person from my childhood. She was my great uncle's girlfriend. And so she was quite a character and around a lot, you know. But she passed away when I was really young. She got sick and passed away, I think in her late 50s. And I was 10 years old. So I went all of these years where I had kind of forgotten about Not, except for when someone would bring her up or somebody would whip out a photo album. And then sometime in 2015 or maybe 2014, I started to think about her, but I couldn't remember. To this day, I can't remember what triggered that memory. It probably had something to do with writing. But I started to try to piece together what her life may have been if she had had children, for example. You know, just a lot of what ifs that I do when I write in general. And so I thought, what if I wrote a story or a novel based on Not's life, but I give her all these attributes that she didn't have in real life, you know, education, that sort of thing, children and so forth. But I also I decided that if I was going to do a project like that, I didn't want to erase what I knew of the real Not, you know. And so that's where the alcohol came in, and that's where the attitude came in. So it was fun and challenging to merge this fictional Not and this real Not together. Yeah, but I enjoyed it every step of the way. And you know, it's what I do. I enjoyed the whole what if, you know, question around people. Yeah.
Well, she's a memorable character, and she has really stuck with me. So thank you for creating her.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about silence in this book. It's very powerful, and it's kind of scattered throughout. A lot of the most significant moments are moments when characters leave something unsaid. And sometimes you italicize the thoughts, but they're really, they appear regularly throughout the novel. And looking back on it, I just finished the book for the second time last night, and loved it the second time too.
Thank you.
But I think that silence really, for me, gave the experience a lot of depth. Was that hard to accomplish? You seem to show a lot of restraint as a writer, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts about the silence in the book.
Yes, it was something that I had to be conscious of, because my sort of knee-jerk or first reaction, or instinct rather, is to write out a thought, you know. And there were moments when I said, you know what, I have to trust the reader. The reader has learned about these people, they've learned about the environment, they've learned about their histories. And so when a character gets just on the edge of that mountaintop, you know, and but doesn't fall off, it's because they don't need to. Everyone knows, or we don't need to see them fall off. Everyone knows what comes next, you know. And so there are a lot of moments like that in the novel where I don't need the characters to say something, because everything they have said leading up to it implies what comes next. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing technique, and it really builds the truth of the entire world.
Thank you.
Okay, speaking of silence, if you've watched the news in the last year or two, you know that silence has been hard to come by. It's
Right.
we're living in a very tumultuous era, and you know, a lot of students will be watching our conversation. And we have so many wonderful student writers at the University of Mississippi, creative writers and poets. And then in our composition courses, a lot of writers who are just trying to find their voices and their own writing processes. And it's kind of a hard time to be a reader and writer.
Absolutely.
Do you have any tricks or advice for us about how to find quietude, the quietude necessary to read and to write?
Yes, and it didn't come to me easily. But what I had to do essentially is schedule the time. And when I say schedule, it doesn't necessarily mean choose a specific time of day, but I did have to say, for X amount of hours today, I am going to read from this novel that I bought, you know, a month ago. Or I'm going to write for a minimum of 1 hour today, you know. And when I do that, the TV gets shut off, my phone gets put on airplane mode, and that's what I'm going to do for today. And it also, because that didn't always work, it worked most of the time, but sometimes I had to make myself stick to where writing is concerned. I had to hold myself to a word count, you know. Today I'm going to write at least 500 words, and I want at least half of them to be salvageable, you know.
Yeah.
So I think setting little daily or weekly quotas can really help.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. And what's your social media strategy?
Well, I got rid of most of my social media. I went off of Twitter. I'm not a big tweeter, but I was someone who got on and read and looked at people's tweets and stuff. And so probably now going on 2 months ago, I deactivated Twitter. And now the account has disappeared altogether. And I didn't intend for that to happen, but it is what it is. And I let go of Facebook some time ago. And now I just have Instagram only, because I like looking at people's photos, you know, and I like occasionally posting a photo. And so for now, I'm going to try to do everything with just one social media platform, you know.
Yes.
And it keeps me, and I don't spend as much time because I'm not toggling between 3 all day.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope our students will listen to that advice. Brilliant people limit their social media time.
You have to.
Yeah, yes. You mentioned the characters, and the dialogue is incredible throughout this book, and all of the characters speak for themselves, and you use dialogue to really drive most of the action in the book. And there was never a moment as I was reading when I thought, oh, that person would not say this. All the dialogue was incredibly true and authentic. Um, and you've got a very rich array of characters. So I'm wondering, how difficult was that, and were there characters' voices that came easier to you than others?
Absolutely. Um, so I'll answer the question about voices that came easier than others. All of the women's voices came to me fairly easily because I grew up spending 99% of my time with women, you know. It was the men's voices who were hard for me because I did not spend a lot of time around men, and I definitely didn't spend a lot of time around men who talked, who spoke a lot. You know, I grew up with a father in the home, but he was very quiet, you know, so were my uncles. So the women's voices came easy. Otis Lee's voice was hard. You know, the first couple of drafts, he sounded and he had speech patterns and said things that were more associated with women, you know. And so I had to go in and I had to really edit him a lot. Um, but in terms of the first question of keeping the characters kind of distinct and their voices distinct, what I what I do for that is I sort of picture someone I know, and I let them be the character in my mind, you know. And I mimic the way they speak. Sometimes I throw in some things that they don't do, such as ums and wells and stuff like that. But it really helps me to visualize my characters as a person who I know. That helps me a lot. Yeah.
Well, Otis Lee was amazing, and it was my favorite character in the book. I
Thank
just,
you.
yeah, loved Otis Lee. So he seems real to me.
Yeah. He's a good guy. Yeah.
Um, well, so West Mills, in West Mills, there's a lot of strife, and there are problems, racism, poverty, alcoholism, but there's also so much optimism and hope, and it really is a supportive community for the most part. And that's something that all of our judges who are anonymous mentioned in about your book, that there's this steady stream of optimism and love throughout the novel. Thinking about our country and the U.S. South too, are there reasons for us to feel hopeful and optimistic about the future?
Yes, there are. And I don't think they may not be as easy to see at the moment. But I think one thing that we have to remember is that things do eventually change, you know, and it can be really, really slow. And the change isn't always a complete change, you know, as we see now. But if we can just remember that somewhere down the road things will be better, you know. And sometimes we take 10 steps forward, 6 steps backwards, but things always get better. And I just kind of hold on to that hope, you know. I'm 42 or almost 42, and I may never see a world free of racism, but you know, 10 generations from now, maybe we'll be half a step closer, you know. And so I think of things like that, and that I think that helps me move forward. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So I know you're in New York City today, and you live, you have experience in different types of worlds, the rural South and the urban North, and of course Willie Morris did too.
Mhm.
And I'm just, do you have any reflections about that divide? Has it fueled your creativity in any particular way?
Yes, you know, it has. I when I now that I'm in New York, sometimes I think about some of the perceptions people and perceptions I used to have of the North and people of the North, and how those perceptions are old. They are centuries old, you know, and vice versa. The way people in the North feel and think about people in the South. Some of it still stands, obviously, you know, but these are just these antiquated perceptions that create these divisions. Um, and I find that I'm often thinking about it, and it comes up in my writing a lot. You know, in West Mills and even the book I'm writing now, there's a lot of North versus South sort of thing, you know, going on, and and a lot of it is based on a lack of experience, just pure perception, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about what you're working on now. I know it'll be a few years, but I'm looking forward to reading your next novel. And you might not want to talk about it, and that's okay too. But can you just give us a hint about what you're working on now?
Sure. Well, hopefully it won't be a few years. Hopefully it'll be next year, depending on how editing goes. But I'm working on a novel that is also set in West Mills, in the fictional town of West Mills. It is not a sequel. This novel sort of dips back in time into the 70s, and it is a murder mystery, actually. Yeah, it's a murder mystery. And a few of the characters from in West Mills are in the book. Not makes a little cameo appearance, but she is not one of the lead characters at all. Um, but one of her daughters is.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
fantastic.
So
Something for us to look forward to.
yeah.
Well, Deshaun, that's all the time we have, but I wanted to thank you again and say congratulations.
Thank you so much. This is such a great honor. Such a great honor. Thank you so much. And thank those anonymous judges for me, whoever they are.
I will, and we're gonna, when it's safe to party again, we're gonna invite you down.
Thank you so much. I look forward to it.
Here's what Jonathan Haupt, one of our judges, had to say about In West Mills.
Greetings from the nonprofit Pat Conroy Literary Center here in Beaufort, South Carolina. I'm Jonathan Haupt, the center's executive director and also one of the judges for the annual Willie Morris Award for Southern Fiction, which this year is being presented to the extraordinary writer Deshaun Charles Winslow for his debut novel, In West Mills, published by Bloomsbury. I'm honored to be asked to say a few words about this novel and its author, but before turning to that happy task, let me first say how grateful I am to the good folks who make possible the annual Willie Morris Awards and make it such an absolute pleasure to serve as a judge for the fiction competition. This prestigious award grants such welcome and well-respected recognition to Southern writers, and it honors the remarkable literary legacy and the spirit of generosity of the late Willie Morris. I'm thankful to the University of Mississippi's Rhetoric and Writing program for shepherding the awards, and to Stephen Monroe and Susan Nicholas in particular for their heroic efforts with the award during these decidedly challenging times. And I'm well beyond grateful to the award's founders, Dave and Reba Williams, for their friendship, their vision, and their stalwart advocacy for the literary arts in and beyond the American South. When In West Mills was reissued in its paperback edition last summer, I was invited to review it for the Southern Review of Books. In this moment today, that review also seems to capture why I found the novel to be not only deserving of Willie Morris Award, but indeed representative of the vital need for the award to honor and to amplify the positive impact of daring and exceptional literature of the South. Let me read from my article in the Southern Review of Books, because I don't know that I can say it any better than I already did. Deshaun Charles Winslow's transcendent debut novel, In West Mills, does not lack for affirming reviews. The novel has already been named winner of the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize and a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, in addition to appearing often on best of lists, including those of Time, USA Today, Entertainment Weekly, Southern Living, Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, Essence, and the Los Angeles Times. The critical attention is well deserved. Unfolding between the 1940s and the 1980s in the hardscrabble hamlet of West Mills, North Carolina, where Black and white communities are separated by a canal and so much else, Winslow's intimate, dialogue-driven novel is evocative of August Wilson's Century Cycle, the 10 plays Wilson set in the Pittsburgh Hills neighborhood of his upbringing as a lens through which to explore the American experience decade by decade. Winslow is likewise invested in the study of changes, some minor, others upending, in the lives of his memorable cast over time set against the unfolding backdrop of the larger American drama. While defining and challenging the bonds of a small community occupy much of Winslow's narrative, the heart of the novel is an anti-hero outsider, free-spirited, well-read, and sexually liberated Azalea Knott Center, so nicknamed for the fist-like ball she would roll herself into as a child to protect her small treasures from those who would challenge her possession of them. Sometimes teacher, sometimes house cleaner, Knott defies societal conventions with her love of drink and men and independence, which manifest in 2 unwanted pregnancies and being ostracized from her own family. Knott dares others, including Winslow's readers, not to love her, and yet the fiery spirit and dogged determination inspire adoration nonetheless. With Knott, Winslow has gifted American literature with an unforgettably original character, and we are better off for having shared her challenging company. The counterweight to Knott's isolating and sometimes self-destructive nature is Otis Lee Loving, problem-solving, protective family man with a fractured hero complex stemming from a failed attempt to rescue a family member from the consequences of her own choices. A big-hearted would-be redeemer, Otis Lee has a capacity to see the untapped potential in others, and he doesn't give up on Knott, even when she's on the cusp of giving up on herself. You don't want to be caught up in other folks' lies and secrets. Ain't a good feeling to keep stuff in you, warns Rose, Otis Lee's mother, or is she? As the community of West Mills undertakes the rearing of Fran and Eunice, the 2 daughters Knott gives up to other families. The truth of their lineage doesn't stay secret for long. In the sisters' rivalrous affections for Otis Lee's son, Breezy, fates and families become even more intertwined. But ultimately, it's the long-held secret of Otis Lee's parentage, the truth revealed to Knott, that transforms the destinies of outcasts and affirms the redemptive power of love. In his instructive and confessional essay, Why I Write, the late Pat Conroy challenged readers to create fictional worlds, quote, so fully developed, so richly contained in the oneness of their own universe that I will never want to leave. Deshaun Charles Winslow has given us such a world in his vision of West Mills, a world notably dedicated to the reader, in which Black stories matter, and we cannot help but wish we would linger and listen and learn a while longer.
Congratulations again, Deshaun. Thanks to the tireless efforts of poet Susan Kinsolving, the Willie Morris Awards added a new member to our awards family, giving its first award for Southern poetry last year. We received hundreds of entries in this category from across the U.S. and overseas, a testament to the enduring dedication of poets. And the prize goes to Southern Horses by Christian Garduno. Earlier this week, Derek Harrell caught up with our winner.
Ladies and gentlemen, and those in attendance, my name is Derek Harrell. I'm Associate Professor of English and African American Studies, also a member of the Willie Morris Advisory Board here at the University of Mississippi, Oxford, Mississippi. I am here with Christian Garduno. Welcome, man, and congratulations on winning the Poetry Award, the Willie Morris Poetry Award. How does it feel?
Oh, it feels fantastic, Derek. It feels fantastic. It feels fantastic to have people reading my work and recognizing it, and to have everyone involved, including the judges, David, Susan, the people on the other side of the award, people like yourself who read it, enjoyed it, the judge, of course, everyone who got involved and still believe in poetry. It's great to be a part of this world.
Absolutely, man. I'm so excited to be talking with you today. The winning poem obviously is Southern Horses. What was previously we were talking about sort of the imagery that are in the poem, or the images that reside in the poem. But what was like your overall inspiration for composing the piece?
Well, I had entered the contest previously, the year previous, and I used the same poem basically, but I rendered it down, and I wanted it to be a sort of like a bus ride through the South, in the sense of sometimes you're looking through the glass on the inside, and sometimes you're looking through the glass on the other side. So by that I mean sometimes I'm talking about places I've been personally, and other times I'm imagining places that I've heard of in folklore, like Florida, for instance, that I've never been, but I got to imagine them through this piece, and I want to give it to everyone, not just in the South, but all over, to go with not only places they've been, but to places they may want to go someday.
That's really interesting, right? I know myself as a writer, there's a lot of imagining that I do of places I haven't been. For you, how does that sort of imagination process and the actual, or the imagining of places that you haven't been, and the actual landscape of places that you've seen, physically you've been there, you've seen it, how do those two sort of ideas intersect?
Right. I think for me, it's kind of like having one foot in experience and one foot in imagination.
Mm,
You know, I don't really go to poetry. I think I go toward more like imagery, and using memory and imagination as a sort of like divining rod to where I want to go, and it leads me to where I'm going. And then when I get there, and I write a line like, you know, you mentioned earlier, the one of the final lines of the piece, every robin on its way to Paraguay, just like Hemingway. You know, and to me, that's like sitting at mile zero at Key West, at the very bottom, and looking at those birds that get to keep going, and you know, we're stuck like human driftwood, and you know, kind of using all of that, you know, experiences and things that we get to call ours as American, like Hemingway, and travel, and just getting to imagine it, and giving that imagination, sharing that imagination. I think that's kind of what I wanted to give the reader.
that's lovely. And when you, every time I read that line, the Paraguay Hemingway, right? And then human driftwood, just that sort of description was so fresh for me. Um, how do you, the sonics here, they're booming throughout and they're so present and it's so musical, right? There's the blues in the poem, right? Like the one-eyed woman who is carrying the blues, maybe, or carrying or crying the blues, right?
Yeah,
This
yeah,
blues ethos throughout. And then there's like the mentioning of sort of blues singers, right? I think you mentioned Honey Boy in here, right? The Hattie, is it Hattie Hart that's mentioned? I know there's a Hattie that's mentioned.
I think I'm using that, tapping into that kind of imagery. But blues to me is very important. It is my favorite type of music. I think it's part of all music since then, including jazz. But and I think when you talk about the South, and I think in any dimension, there has to be a mention of the blues, because it permeates everything. And I don't care if you're in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, you know, here in Texas, where I'm at, I'm down in Corpus Christi. I mean, it is part of everything. It's everywhere. So I don't think you can write about the South without mentioning, you know, the blues. Just like you can't really mention the South without talking about slavery. It has to be in the conversation, but it doesn't always have to be, you know, a condemnation, in the sense of, you know, that's all we're going to talk about. You know, I thought I'd have to mention it because it's my favorite kind of music. You know, and to write a piece about the South without mentioning it, I would be doing a disservice to the blues and to my favorite type of music. And I want to, like, again, share that with people who might not necessarily have that in their everyday life.
That's so interesting, and that resonates with me strongly. I previously mentioned to you that I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My first collection of poems is called Cotton, but it's about like my grandfather who was born and raised in the South. Long story short, I had never stepped foot in true Mississippi before writing that book, but I do this imagining of the landscape, and one of the things that I imagine is the Delta, right? So I like when you talked about the sort of one foot in and one foot out. and also the power of imagining. And some irony, how there's this sort of serendipitous connection with you and I. You mentioned Honey Boy Edwards in the poem. Honey Boy Edwards is on the title of the collection that I wrote, which I had to get clearance for. So I hear you about the blues and its connection to the South. And speaking about the blues, can you talk about the ways in which sonics is something, not only in this poem, but something that you privilege or that you utilize as a writer?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the blues vocabulary, the blues vibe, I guess you could say, the blues sort of swagger mentality. You know, there's a lot to it. I mean, there is the real deep blues where you are sad and you're singing because you're sad, but there's a whole other room of the blues where you're singing because you're ecstatic, and it's still blues. It might be a different shade of blues, but you know, it encompasses everything, and I think it's a great metaphor for America because it grew up and grew into other rooms and it became jazz, rock and roll, and whatever there is going on now. It's exploded. But if you want to boil it and render it all down, it'll be the blues, and it'll be waiting for you in any of these great places I mentioned, and so many more that I didn't get to mention in this poem.
Yeah, well, the poem sings, like the blues, man, and it has that sort of blues ethos, like you're saying, and it's almost I don't know, it's a happy poem, right? But not happy, it's an optimistic poem, right? And it's an optimistic poem about the future, and this is what I was interested in. It's about the future, but it's also really reaching back to the past, right? It's reaching back to the past and traditions and Southern traditions and things that are valuable and connected to the essence and because when I think of the South, I think like the South is almost a different country, right? Like you should have a passport to get to the South if you've never been here, the true South, right?
You know when you're in Mobile, Alabama, when you're in Jackson, Mississippi, you're not coming around thinking, this Salt Lake City. There's no way that you're going to get those things confused. There's an atmosphere and a temperature, and it has nothing to do with the weather. What I mean? It does too, though. But there's an atmosphere. There's a thickness in the air that you are aware of things that you might not be aware of in Brooklyn, or you might not be aware of in LA. There's a tension almost. There's a long, you mentioned there's an optimism in this, but when I researched it, the optimism is tempered by history. So you have to be very, careful, because no matter how hopeful you want to be, you have to remember that we are anchored by this past, our shared past, and that kind of gave me that weight where I need to mention this, even though I don't want to dwell on certain things, but I did want to mention, dubious bank loans, people trying to get over on you, and those kind of things, and having to get over, not over people, but over situations, and get out of this bank loan and have to double clutch and do 2 months rent, and so-and-so had a baby, now we got to take care of them, but those things happen. And it seems like in the South, when it rains, it pours more on us, and I wanted this to kind of be like, yeah, we have these hard times, but because of these hard times, when we do, have a good time, like in New Orleans, we let the good times roll, so to speak, and I tried to say it in French, which is terrible, but, we just got back, my family just got, my son, Dylan, hi son, and my wife, Nahimi, we just got back from New Orleans. And like you were mentioning earlier, experience and imagination. My wife had read that part about New Orleans before we went. She had never been. And then she read it when we were there with all the flavors and the foods and the smells. And she was like, oh, I get it now. I get that part of what you're saying about the Dixieland jazz and different kinds of jazz and the different foods. And, we had beignets at Café du Monde. And so now she kind of gets it. And I'm like, well, that's what I want to give people, so that when they do go there one day, they'll be like, oh, I remember that part. That's cool.
Yeah, man. Let me ask you this. Now I'm jealous. The last time I was in New Orleans, and the reason probably why you and I are having a conversation over Zoom is because of quarantine, right? And the pandemic. So the last time I was in New Orleans was March of last year. And it was when the pandemic had just started, and my wife, my child, myself, my sister, and my mom were sitting, I forget what restaurant we were in, but we were in a restaurant and we were having like char-grilled oysters, and we're watching basketball, and then it just cut off. And it says, game is canceled, there's a pandemic, you know, and we had this Airbnb, and we were stuck in the Airbnb for the rest of the trip, right? Because
Well, yeah, yeah.
I was gonna
That's
ask,
pretty
how
well.
was that for y'all? Now, almost a year later from when I was last there.
We were there. My wife and I had went by ourselves on the backside of a road trip. We went out to Virginia to see my brother. What's up, Pat? And we were coming back. So I was like, let's go through New Orleans. And so we did. And it was about half, no, well, less than half the vibe. Everyone was kind of like deflated. And it was a time where we got to really like look at the architecture, because you know there were limits. I guess they had gone too far, and so they had to reel back, go like phase 2 or something, to where like this was closed, like almost like every other place was closed, and then like this place was only half, that place was only half, and so it was really more like get everything to go. But it's not the same when you can't sit down and, you know, with your kinfolk and talk and jive,
Especially
you know.
in New Orleans, man.
Yeah, and then we just got back we were there the week between Christmas and New Year's, and it had opened up in Blossom again. There were people, there were the big bands, there were the whole marching bands and stuff. So it was coming back to life again. But you kind of got the sense that we don't want to go full throttle, because then we're just gonna be in our house next week.
And so you capture there's this wonderful moment. I'm sorry to cut you off. It just made me think of this wonderful moment in the poem, right? Where you say, New Orleans, hold on to your soul, raw oysters, crawfish pie, like the food, right? And is that something that appears in a lot of your work, food and things of that nature?
It's atmosphere.
Atmosphere.
You know, there's no, I mean, I'm not gonna go on about, you know, Virginia's food. I mean, it's great, but it's nothing like New Orleans. You know, it's
right.
not to put down the Dominion state. They're great, but I mean, there's nothing like New Orleans food. And if you haven't been there, then you might not know what I'm saying. But when you've been there and you know it, and you take that first bite, and you just want to, you know, throw everything else away. I mean, there's maybe because they are below sea level, that the rice cooks differently, the beans are right. I don't know. I can't attest to that. I'm not a native, but yeah, I try to gather the essence of whether, if it's a place I'm writing about, then to try to get that, you know, because New Orleans is the music, it is the food, it is walking down Bourbon Street, it's taking a side trip, getting lost, coming back, finding everything again. It's definitely trying to get the whole environment, and when you've been there, you're like, yeah, and then you haven't been there, you know, like you're like, I want to go there, you know, look it up, you know, and then when you get there and you have a bite of that trout meunier, and you're like, ah, that's what he's talking about. I get it. And then you can like shout me out from there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Might slip and fall into a hurricane or two too, and I don't mean the natural disaster type. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you are in Corpus Christi now. Is that where you're?
Yeah. No. I have been here for about 15 years. I grew up in California. I was born in Houston, so I think that's why I started it off there.
That was gonna be my next question.
I was born in Houston, but I didn't grow up there. I was only there for about 2.5 years, so I don't even remember it.
So why Houston, and why the year 3003? Because I was very curious about that. That appears in the poem.
I think because if I were to say it in 10 years, then it would have been like a census struggle. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to say, you know, it's gonna be the biggest thing in the world, like in the future, and the future's not that far away. You know, like, you know, I hadn't been to Houston in a while, and then I went back with my son and my wife, actually for my grandma's funeral. But and it just seemed like it had exploded. Like I remember being huge, but it seemed even huger then. And the people, like I say, they are. And I had to rewrite that line when I got back. I had to add that line in. The Houstonian is a grittier breed of human indeed, and that is true. The way, if you've been on a Houston freeway, that line will ring true with you. Those people are savage and in a great way. Those people are going to lead not only the country but the world. You know what I'm saying? They deserve everything they get, because they do it 365 days in Houston, and you know, that's why I started it there. And it was kind of like a metaphor for me starting, but I wanted to be like, you know, this. I think Houston gets overlooked. I think it gets a certain rap. I'm not saying it doesn't deserve it. I'm just saying there's a lot of potential. And I think, like when I say 100 million oilful towers, I kind of wanted to play on Eiffel Towers where like, dude, this place is great too. Like they're spending money, they don't mind having money, you know what I mean? And they seem like they've been broke for a long time, like the type that's been broke for a long time, and they know how to use their money when they got it. And I kind of started off like a spit in the eye, like these Houstonians are going to show everyone how to do it. They're kind of like our New York, I guess, our New York, our Manhattan, like they're the ones that we're going to look to in the future to say like, how do we do this? Well, how does Houston do it? That's kind of like where I want to go.
So just kind of wrapping up now, I greatly appreciate this. And this is kind of a cliche but a cliche question, but I am genuinely curious. By way of writing, what's next for you?
Well, I think I want to say thank you, Derek, for your time. I know you're busy, and I appreciate you reading and doing your homework on this. What's next? I mean, I think fantastic. I think what's next for me is, there's new goals with new plateaus. What was a goal for me a year ago, it's different now. Now I want to, expand. I want to add this into maybe a chapbook or into just a regular book of poems, a collection.
Do it, man. Do it. It's good stuff.
I just want to say anyone out there who's writing, who might be writing under the covers in a journal, if I could do it, I know that another cliche, anyone can do it. I'm just a guy with a journal. I'm just a guy with a notebook. I'm just a guy with my notebook. Just be a pen in this. All there is. So what's next for me is getting a collection together. I'm just a guy. I don't have an agent. I'm not a Hollywood fella. No one's here telling me, hey, Christian, go ahead and put this together and do it this way. I had to figure it all out, just like most people do. So I'm just looking for the next opportunity to get my work out there, the next opportunity, to get a collection, and hopefully, I could edit something, maybe, be a reader in a contest, be a judge someday myself, and I can shine light, and I can be on the other side of the Zoom and ask people about their work.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, Christian Garduno, this was a great conversation. I appreciate you, and congratulations again. And let's stay in touch, man. The writing community is not the largest community in the world, so let's stay in touch, brother.
Derek, will do. Thank you very much, and thank you to Ole Miss and everyone there for all their work. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Here's what our poetry judge, Susan Kinsolving, had to say about Southern horses.
Hello. It has been my honor and pleasure to read so many fine poems for this contest. So I thank all the poets who submitted to us. I also want to thank Dave and Reba White-Williams for envisioning this wonderful stimulation to reading and writing. It's been a joy to participate in it. The perfect home for the Willie Morris Award for Southern Poetry is the University of Mississippi. And I also thank them for being the embodiment of the best of Southern hospitality. I'd like to begin today by reading a passage from Willie Morris, who is not a poet, but certainly a wordsmith of the tallest order. Willie Morris wrote, "I've always had a love for American geography, and especially for the landscapes of the South. One of my pleasures has been to drive across it with no one in the world knowing where I am, languidly absorbing thoughts and memories of old moments of people vanished now from my life." Poems are, of course, vehicles of expression for imagery and enigmas. And Christian Garduno's wonderful poem, Southern Horses, is such a vehicle. The poem traverses the South, reveling in its diverse regions, encountering its past and present. So whether walking or galloping, driving, or perhaps flying, Garduno's poem takes its readers on an energetic ride across 6 southern states, one of which I'm happy to say is Mississippi. The poem's fast pace is intentional. It is much more an experience than an edification. It is a Southern pastiche, a montage, if you will. And the reader encounters landscapes, seascapes, eccentricities, people, lots of music, and plenty of good food. The poem's fun to read because it activates the imagination. It accelerates its way with a really good pace and a wonderful dynamic spirit. So may I say, saddle up, fasten your metaphorical seatbelt, and enjoy Southern Horses by Christian Garduno. Thank you.
This is Southern Horses. Houston will be the biggest city on earth in the year 3003. Banjos and Bitcoin, more refineries than wineries, 100 million oilful towers scraping along the skies of the new American South, probably serving up that choking thirst for crude. The Houstonian is a grittier breed of human indeed. Here, the entrepreneurial East collides with the wild, wild West. Houston is getting mighty crowded, but there's always room for you. So put on your boots, draw down some roots. 2 lone stars can make a galaxy shine. Grits for breakfast in Mobile, Alabama. Crinoline gowns on the Azalea Trail maids. A proud profile on the sun-drenched veranda. Meet us up in the Japanese tea gardens, and we're all lit up like the gas lights on Savannah Street. Invisible age-old traditions do run deep. They go beyond ye old antebellum days, sailing round the bay, silver sun rays. And when summer crowds in too close, we'll slip down the Alaxoy, crying out along the shore, Jubilee, down the torpedoes, full steam ahead. We're holding hands, walking down Dauphine Street, skipping to our own drummer, and no one ever hears the beat, or even the cadence of a one-eyed woman crying the blues. A sweltering psalm of the Yazoo overflowing. Work and love and poverty, dubious bank loans, and songs of a most recent slavery. There's a sharecropper's granddaughter wailing over at the Dewdrop Inn, jamming on a bar guitar and a 35-cent Rexall harmonica. They used to be field songs, turned into factory songs, twisted into bitter songs, refrains they're familiar with in Mississippi, and rumble low in Angola, down in Louisiana. Songs great Aunt Hattie sang walking along the Big Sunflower as a child, long before Big Joe and Honey Boy came along, harmonizing them old-fashioned songs of whiskey and women, love, loss, and longing. Songs of so long ago, they're soul souvenirs these days. The Bayou Carré lulls you into its fold with the timbre of Southern lazy luxury, sweet temptation and delicious excess. Here, life and love are both below sea level. This town knows how to get down. New Orleans, hold on to your soul. Raw oysters, crawfish pie, filet gumbo, trout meunier, Dixieland, Cajun, Zydeco, ragtime. Sitting in Café du Monde, munching a beignet, reading the Times-Picnier. Half drunk, 3/4 stoned in the Big Greasy. Bourbon Street in a public housing project named Desire. Canal Street, Decatur Street. Oh, laissez le bon temps brûler. Saints and souls and silky saxophones swirling around together in the mouth of the Mississippi. And it's all boogie woogie, go, go, go. A true crescendo in the Crescent City tonight. Old Dominion, Appalachian, Blue Ridge, Shenandoah. Ferry out to Portsmouth, sanctuary for one night only. Virginia Beach, back up to Neptune Bay. Virginia is for lovers, they say. They know what God knows. And it's raining the way it did in Florida when I was a kid. Eating key lime, making a beeline for Mallory Square. Audacious green sunsets flashing across the Tropic of Paradise. And we can hide ourselves away from all the rest. Dig in deep down at the Blind Pig, Key West. Key Largo, Duck Keys, Dry Tortugas. Jump ship from here or you better skip back. We're all stranded along Duval Street, just like human driftwood. And every robin on its way to Paraguay, just like Hemingway. a setting sun staring through your eyes, begging and daring to take you with it. Thank you.
Congratulations, Christian. Congratulations again to our winners. I'd like to thank all of our judges, our production team at the Center for the Study of Southern Culture, and the staff of the Department of Writing and Rhetoric. Submissions are now being accepted for our next awards cycle. We invite authors, editors, and publishers to nominate books published during the 2020 calendar year, and we invite poets to nominate their own unpublished poems. You can find more information by following the link at the bottom of your screen. Thank you for joining us, and good night.